So first I wanted to talk a little bit about why we thought we should do a survey. Well, in 2002, Angela O'Callahan from the University of Nevada Cooperative Extension did a survey. She surveyed elementary school principals in CCSD to see, how were the gardens being used, what subjects were being taught, what were some of the barriers to implementing a garden program within the district? Fear of vandalism at the time was a big barrier to starting a garden program within a school. She also looked at what were some of the teacher resources that were necessary to have a successful garden program. Well, fast forward to 2015, the garden programs had changed a lot in CCSD, right? I mean, for heaven's sakes, Green Our Planet had worked with 86 schools to implement school gardens. So they had boomed. It was a boom in school gardens in CCSD. So we decided, maybe we should take a look at our school garden programs. That, and we also wanted to expand on what O'Callahan had done and had published in 2005, to really understand the school garden program. What were we using our school gardens for in the district? What subjects are being taught? How many hours are we out in the school gardens? We also wanted to know, what are the resources that are necessary to have a really successful garden program? So we looked at resources necessary. We also wanted to know, what are some of the barriers? What are some of the barriers to having a school garden, and what are some of the barriers to getting out and using the school garden that teachers or administrators experience? And then lastly, we wanted to know, what are some of the benefits that students are reaping from going out and spending time in the gardens, at least the perceived benefits? What are teachers and administrators seeing, changes in behavior and those sort of things? So today I'm going to present some of the results. I mean, those of you who took the survey and stuck with it to the end, it was a really long survey. And if I presented all the results, we'd be here until happy hour, and I would probably be the only one left in this room because you guys would be bored out of your mind, right? So we kind of picked the most interesting findings, and I'll be talking about those today. So the survey kind of went in two different waves. So the first wave, we worked really closely with CCSD, with Cheryl Wagner, our partner at the district, and we got approval from the district to send it out to 250 of our garden, programs that we already knew about. So teachers and administrators who already had a garden and were participating in garden programs. Then later in the year, we got permission to send it out more broadly. So we got to send it out to at least one person at every school in the district. So we ended up getting 334 people who participated in the survey. Of that 334, 280 actually had school gardens established within their school. And I'm going to be really focusing on those for the rest of this presentation. But we also got information from 54 either teachers or administrators who didn't yet have a school garden, but either they wanted to have a school garden or they were going to be implementing a school garden within the next year. Of the 280 schools that had garden, 214 of the respondents were teachers, and 66 of the respondents were administrators. And again, we'll be really focusing on that. So the first question we had was, when was your garden program started? So we want to know how long the gardens had been in the schools. And you can see from this graph that 75% of the school gardens had only been established within the past 2 years. 86% had only been established within the past 3 years. So the people who responded to our survey, their garden programs were really relatively new, established within the last 3 years. So we also want to know, well, who's answering the survey? What grades do they either teach, or are they principals? What sort of schools do they work in? We can see the vast majority of the respondents were in elementary schools. That makes sense. I mean, Green Our Planet, they've worked mostly with elementary schools, and most of the gardens are in elementary schools, so that's the respondents that we got, mostly elementary schools. We wanted to know, when are the school gardens being used? And you can see that 93% of the respondents say that we use the school gardens during class time. But we also have, schools that are using the school gardens before school and after school. 31% use the school garden after school, 25% use the school garden before school. So mostly during class time, but we also can use the gardens before and after school. We wanted to know how much time their teachers are spending in the garden. So actually this question was only for the teachers to answer. So about 60% of the teachers spend between 1 and 3 hours a month teaching out in the school gardens. When we looked at this question in a little bit more detail though, we found that schools where gardens have been established for a longer period of time, so maybe they'd had the school garden for 4 years or 5 years. The teachers were spending more hours out in the garden during a month. So it seems to us the longer the school garden has been within the school, the more time the teachers are able to get out there and use the garden. It could be because they have their education resources are really well established, their curriculum is really well established, their garden is really well established, so they're able to go out there and spend more hours in the garden. So then we asked teachers only, again, this question, and for the majority of the questions we asked, the teachers could sort of pick all that applied to their garden. But for this particular question, they can only answer one thing, and that was, what is the main reason that you use your school garden? We can see that 37% of the teachers said they use it mainly for academic instruction, 21% said they use it for experiential learning, and 16% said they use it for subject matter reinforcement. So they teach their science and math in the classroom, then they go out to the school garden to reinforce that subject matter material. Then we asked the question, is your school garden used to teach core academic instruction? Do you use your school garden for that? 87% of our respondents said yes, we do use our school gardens for that core academic instruction. Then of those who said yes, we said, well then what of those core subjects do you teach out in your garden? 100% of our participants said that they teach science out in their garden. After listening to John's presentation this morning, that makes really good sense, right? I mean, a garden is a natural science lab, so 100% of those who use the garden for academic instruction are doing science. We also see that quite a lot of our respondents are using the garden for English language arts or mathematics, 76 and 75% for those subjects as well. In addition to the core subjects, we want to know, well, what else is being taught in the garden? What beyond those core subjects? We can see that of our respondents, 80% said they teach health and nutrition out in the garden. Again, hey, that makes good sense. You're out there growing fruits and vegetables. Why not teach a little nutrition and health while we're out there? 53% use it for environmental studies. Again, John touched on that today when he was speaking this morning. 36% use a school garden for service learning, and 35% use the garden for art. So getting out there and, engaging all of the senses and even doing, art out in the garden. So then the next series of questions, we're really going to focus on, some of the benefits of the school garden, some of the resources necessary, some of the barriers to the school garden. So we had this sort of statement: do you think school gardens, and then teachers and principals could select any of the statements that they thought applied to their school garden. So do you think school gardens increase nutrition knowledge? 88% said yes, we think the school gardens increase nutrition knowledge. Are fun for teachers and students? 83% agreed with that statement. I know one of the superintendents, he has his core principles that he's trying to achieve, right? And feeling safe and happy at school is one of those things that we're striving for. I don't know about you guys, but if I'm having fun, I'm happy. So I think that we're probably hitting that thing that we would like to achieve. 77% of our respondents said that they think school gardens are powerful learning tools, and 74% said that they think that it increases community engagement. Again, another one of those core principles that the superintendent is trying to achieve. On a positive note, not all of the statements were positive. There were a few sort of negative statements, and we see that we really had very low percentage of participants who agreed with those more negative statements. Only 12% of educators thought that school gardens led to increased work or extra work, and only 5% said that they led to time away from instruction. So of the negative statements, we had very few respondents to that. So overall, very, very positive statements about the school gardens. So then the next question we ask is, what are some of the positive observations that you've seen among your students as a result of going out and teaching in your school garden? So we had 78% of the educators thought that it improved environmental awareness. 68% said that they thought that they saw improvements in both health and nutrition, and 89% said that they saw increases in both social skills and improved behavior, as well as students having an improved attitude towards school. So again, very, very positive observations that teachers saw among their students who are being taught out in the garden. We also wanted to know if the educators had seen any changes in their students' behavior, again, as a result of going out and spending time in the garden. So 65% said that the students were showing a greater interest in eating healthier foods. So as a public health professional who also has a degree in nutrition, that was super encouraging information for me, especially as we're trying to curb this obesity epidemic in the United States. 48% said that students are also making healthier food choices. Even at school, they have observed them making healthier food choices. Again, a great thing to hear and see. We wanted to know what skills the students had acquired as a result of going out again and spending time in the garden. 68% of the respondents said that the students are able to recognize different fruits and vegetables. Again, just being exposed to those different fruits and vegetables, having their hands in the garden, growing them, harvesting, those sort of things, have opened up their minds and expanded their ability to recognize different fruits and vegetables beyond what we're used to eating, carrots and broccoli and those sort of things. They could recognize an okra and a radish and those sort of things. Also, 72% saw that students had increased concern for the environment, which is, again, a wonderful thing. And 70% saw that students were increasing their own skills in doing gardening. Again, a lot of us in the desert, we may not, as adults, know anything about gardening. I certainly don't. But, the fact that kids have these skills now, they know how to compost and irrigate and all that sort of stuff, those are some of the positive skills that students are acquiring from spending time in the school gardens. So I am proud to say that one of my Master's of Public Health students, she did an internship with Green Our Planet, and her job during her internship was to work on the Chef to School program. So I'm not sure if Sabina, I don't see her in here, but this is what she did. We have some great chefs in the Valley, right? The chefs at Wynn and chefs at all these great places. Well, she kind of dogged them until they agreed to go to the schools and work with, the teachers with the food that's harvested to teach the students, the teachers, the parents, how to take the food that's harvested from the garden and make it into something that you can eat. What do you do with an okra? Most people probably don't know what to do that. The chefs could teach you how to do that. So one of the questions we wanted to know, what was the impact of the Chef to School program that we had started? 36% of the respondents, they weren't participating in the Chef to School program. We haven't been able to link up every school with a chef yet. But those who were participating in the Chef to School program saw that students were more engaged and that they had improvements in nutrition knowledge as a result of having the chefs come in and teach them how to prepare the food and talk about nutrition and those sort of things. So again, very positive results from that. So we wanted to know, it seems like we have some really successful garden programs in CCSD. We hear all of these great, these great stories about these schools, the garden school programs. We wanted to know, what does it really take to have a successful garden program? So we asked that question. 72% of the respondents said that administrative support is the most important thing to having a successful school program. Again, we sort of heard that in the first two presentations today from Crestwood. 67% said funding. 66% said time in the day for garden instruction. Again, we heard that in the last two presentations. And 63% said motivated teachers. So you have to have both the principals and the teachers supporting and motivated to go out and use the garden for instruction to have a really successful garden program. We wanted to know, what are some of the obstacles to going out and using the school garden? Again, the very last presentation we heard lack of time in the day to, go out and use the school garden, so we have to make sure that we have time. Lack of experience with garden and lack of training in gardening. Again, not all of us grew up being gardeners, so the thought of going out and teaching something in a garden when you don't know how to garden is kind of intimidating, a little bit maybe overwhelming, so lack of training is an obstacle to using the garden. A positive takeaway from this is that only 5% of the respondents thought that a barrier to using the school garden was a lack of administrative support. So on the previous slide, we saw that administrative support was the most important thing to having a successful school garden program, but we see that only 5% of teachers who responded said that they felt like there was a lack of administrative support. So what that tells us is that administrative support is very important, and our teachers and educators are feeling like they're getting that support because so few of them acknowledge that as a barrier to using their school garden. So we wanted to know, what resources best support instruction in the garden. Again, because, Green Our Planet has been building this program, working with sponsors. We want to make sure that teachers are getting what they need, educators are getting what they need to go out and work in the garden. 68% said that they need training in garden basic instructions, and they also need funding to be able to, those are things that really support academic education out in the garden. Also teacher training in garden skills and access to garden-based curriculum and education, those were also over 50% of the respondents said that those resources are very important for them to be able to use the garden for academic instruction. We wanted to know because, again, Green Our Planet has been working on doing some professional development and teacher training. Wanted to know, well, have teachers and administrators been able to participate in very much professional development or training? So we asked the question, in the past 3 years, what sort of professional development or training have you engaged in? Almost 50% of our respondents indicated that they had not had the opportunity to engage in any sort of professional development or training. And then the next thing we wanted to know, well, if you were able to engage in some professional development, what would be most important? What would you like to see offered as far as professional development or training? You can see that 73% of the respondents said they would like training and connecting the garden to the core academic instruction. So again, how do I use my garden to go out and teach math? How do I use my garden to go out and teach science? Green Our Planet, again, has worked with CCST to develop the curriculum, but teachers want training in how to go out and use that curriculum. 72% said they wanted training in how to connect the garden to the next generation science standard. So again, how do I use my garden to make sure that I'm teaching what I need to teach? And then 64% said they needed training in just those basic gardening how-tos. So again, how do I go out and how do I work within a garden? A lot of us don't know how to do that. During the last academic year, we wanted to know, or the last 2 academic years, we wanted to know what sort of, support or resources have our garden educators had access to. 50% of those who responded to the survey had received support from our sponsors. So from the community or from business donors. Again, the sponsors are so important to having a successful garden program, and 50% of our respondents had received funding from those sort of sources. 48% had received funding either from a grant or foundation. So again, we've heard that schools are able to apply for grants and get money from foundations, again, to support their garden programs within their school. I thought this was a pretty fun question. I think probably Kira is the one who thought of this question, or maybe my Master's of Public Health student who helped with the survey at Tamami. I want to recognize her as well. One of the more creative people came up with this question. But the question was, if someone just gave you $10,000 to spend on your garden program, how would you like to spend it? What would you like to see change, or how would you invest that resource into your garden program? Almost 70% of our respondents said they would invest that money into the physical site. So having more beds, having more irrigation, having benches for students, just really spending it on the physical site for the garden program. And almost 50% of our respondents said they would invest that money in training. So again, that physical side and training. Training is a sort of a common theme throughout this whole survey, that training is really, really important, a resource that teachers want, and a resource that they would really invest the money if they were given the money to spend themselves. We wanted to know during the last academic year, what different organizations have supported the school gardens. 75% said Green Our Planet. Again, that makes sense because a lot of our contacts with the school garden programs are through Green Our Planet, right? But we also have other programs that support gardens like Create a Change Now, the American Heart Association, the University of Nevada Cooperative Extension. All of those different organizations also work to support the garden programs within CCSD. We see that 1/4, 25% of our respondents also receive support from corporations. So again, those corporate sponsors help them, support their garden programs. So in addition to having a bunch of sort of, you pick what we gave you to pick sort of questions, we also had some open-ended questions where people could write in their thoughts about different things. And so we asked, how has support from sponsors or chefs or farmers, how has that impacted your school garden program? So just some of those written in responses that we thought were very interesting to share today. So one person wrote that having support from their chefs and their farmers have created a buzz not only about the garden but also about how to prepare healthier food. So really the impact of the chefs and the farmers. The farmers have provided much needed nutrition knowledge and community involvement through the school garden. That many of the students want to be part of the school garden club as a result of having the farmers out in the garden and working with the students. Without the sponsors, they would not have had a successful garden program, and without the sponsors, they wouldn't have been able to make some of their garden beds accessible to their students with disabilities. So some really great things that having support from the sponsors, the chefs, and the farmers, how they're really impacting the school garden and making a very positive difference within the school garden programs. So just in summary, some of the key findings that we have taken away from this survey, that at least the people who responded to the survey, the majority of the programs are relatively new, right? 86% have been established within the past 3 years. But even though the programs are relatively new, we're seeing a lot of really positive impacts from the programs. Like students are more engaged in school. They have more interest and awareness of the environment. They have, increased interest in nutrition knowledge and eating healthier. So we're already seeing very, very positive impacts from the School Garden programs. Again, even though the majority of them are relatively new. We also see that educators, they need some support. They need some support from administrators. Again, we've heard that throughout the day, that without administrative support, without a principal who is really committed to the garden program is not going to be successful, so they really need support. Teachers need training, and they said that over and over again throughout the survey. They need training in how to connect the garden to those core academic instruction areas like math and science, but they also want to know how to connect it to the next generation science standard. Teachers need training, again, in those gardening how-tos, how to get out and work within the garden. They need time within their day to be able to take their students out and be able to do their instruction within the garden. And they also need funding and support from sponsors and from grants and funders alike. So what this survey has provided us, both us at UNLV, Green Our Planet, and CCSD, some good information about, how are the garden programs being used? How much time is being spent out in the garden, who's out in the garden, what subjects are being taught out in the garden, but also what's needed to have a really successful garden program. So that was the first round of evaluation that we have done with UNLV in collaboration with CCSD and Green Our Planet, and we would like to continue to do further evaluation of the gardens. So a lot of those things that we asked, those positive observations of the students, were what teachers and administrators perceive, the changes that they perceive that students are having. Now we would like to really measure the impact that the gardens are having. So are they increasing nutrition knowledge? Are students truly consuming more fruits and vegetables as a result of spending time out in the garden? Are they more physically active on the times that they go out and learn math in the garden compared to learning math or science within the classroom? Lots of research has been done on elementary school kids, and we know that during the day, if they have a chance to get out and be physically active, either through recess or physical activity, when they get back in the classroom, they're more alert, they're more attentive, and they tend to do better academically. So do the gardens kind of get that same sort of physical activity break? They're out learning while they're out there, but do they give that break for kids to get out and move and then be more engaged when they get into the classroom? Over the long term, does learning out in the garden increase test scores? Again, we know that's a really important initiative for Clark County School District, is to always make sure that we're trying to increase test scores. Well, are we seeing that impact over the long term of increased test scores? Are the gardens, how are they impacting community engagement? Again, we have seen that through, all of the sponsors and parents coming to the farmers market and the engagement that way, but we would like to continue to evaluate that. And then how are school gardens helping students feel happy and safe at school? How are they making teachers feel happy? How did they impact teacher retainment? Those sort of things. We would like to evaluate that further as well. So thankfully, we have a really good partnership with CCSD, so we're going to be able to continue to do those sort of evaluations, and hopefully next year I'll be able to come back and give you some more information about how the gardens are impacting kids. So lastly, we'd like to thank, again, those teachers and administrators who participated in the survey. We know it was long and it took quite a while to get through it. So again, we're just very, very grateful and thankful for all of you who took the time to participate in the survey. Thank you.